Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first installment of Healthcare Marketing Pulse. Healthcare Marketing Pulse is a five-part webinar series for healthcare marketers from the digital marketing experts at Fathom. Today's session focuses on the trends and insights that are shaping our work with top hospital systems. My name's Joe Adams. I'm the Vice President of Marketing at Fathom, and today I'll be your moderator. So I want to hit a couple housekeeping items before we get started. And first, thank you for your interest in the session. We really appreciate whether you're attending now or watching the recording in the future. Second, if you have questions and you're joining us live, please use the Q&A function. You can find that in the middle of the Zoom bar, and we will hit those questions at the end of the content. And finally, if you'd like to reach out now or in the future, you can shoot a note to hello@fathomdelivers.com, and we'll make sure to answer your questions, get a meeting scheduled, whatever you'd like there. With that, time to kick off. I'd like to introduce our host, Jeremy Mathis. Jeremy is Fathom's Vice President of Client Success. Jeremy has worked in healthcare for nearly 2 decades. He hates when I say that, but it is true. He's been a member of system marketing teams and in his time at Fathom, supported many of our top clients. And so with that, let's get started, Jeremy.
All right. Thank you, Joe. And thank you for reminding me of my age. Always a great way to kick off. No, but in all seriousness, thank you all for joining us here. We are very excited to kick off the Healthcare Marketing Pulse webinar series. As Joe mentioned, this is the first of 5 that we'll be running through here throughout the summer, covering various topics and trends that we're seeing impact healthcare marketing. So really excited to get to that. But I'm even more excited to introduce 3 of my esteemed colleagues here at Fathom that are going to be sharing their perspective on what they're seeing in the marketing space. So up first, you'll hear from Claire Wirtanen, who's our Director of Paid Media. You'll also hear from Rob Hosler, who is our Vice President of Digital Marketing. And last but certainly not least, we will hear from Brittany Trafis, who is our Executive Vice President of AI Innovation. So today, you're going to hear a number of topics. First and foremost, we are going to talk about some of the macro trends that are influencing healthcare marketing. We're going to then talk a little bit about what is the digital landscape? What are the opportunities we're seeing? And what are the key changes that have been taking place over the last year or so that you need to be aware of in order to take advantage and make sure that you're advancing your marketing efforts? Lastly, we're going to talk about artificial intelligence, the elephant in the room. For those of us who have been to any sort of conference over the last year, opened up any sort of marketing newsletter, I guarantee you have heard artificial intelligence. The big joke for those of us here at Fathom, we're at HMPS in April out in Las Vegas. It felt like every other session had the term artificial intelligence somewhere in the title or description. So obviously a hot topic. But despite all the interest, we're still seeing a lot of questions on how to use AI. What is it? What can we do specifically within the healthcare marketing space? So I'm excited to talk a little bit more about that. Before we get started, I think it's important for us to level set on where we are as healthcare marketers. So as we know, there are a number of factors that are influencing how we're able to perform our marketing duties in the healthcare space. And first and foremost has to be the economic pressures that we've all been facing over these last several years. So everything from rising costs of labor to increasing costs of medical supplies and devices are all impacting the bottom line of our organizations. And as we all know, as marketers, if there's an impact to the bottom line, there's also an impact to our marketing budgets. So as you can see here, we are definitely not alone in that. But nearly 80% of healthcare marketers are reporting that these inflationary pressures are causing a decrease in their marketing spend year over year. This, combined with some of the concerns that we're seeing around capacity, right? Maybe difficulty in getting patients into specific services, specific locations, clinics, are causing us to really adjust how we're going to market with some of our marketing efforts. When we look at how consumers are really engaging with digital media, we all know that this is continuing to increase. So, almost 2/3 of consumers here in the United States are reporting that they are most often engaging with digital media. And this is really true across all ages, right? When I think about even my own parents, now both in their 70s, they are very much engaged with podcasts, with, digital devices. The old traditional sitting in front of the TV or listening to the radio is not how they're consuming information, right? On the flip side of that, we are still seeing healthcare organizations dedicating less than 40% of their budgets to digital media, right? So there's definitely a gap and an opportunity for us to refine how we're going to market to really engage our audiences where they are most likely to engage and consume media. So when we get into where we want to go from here, right? It's a really great opportunity for forward thinking healthcare marketers to really reevaluate and reestablish a budgeting and planning approach as we get into our new fiscals, right? So, number one, as marketers, we all know we have to start with the audience, right? Who are we looking to go after? What is the opportunity that we have to really enact the change that we're looking to go for? We then have to look at how does this apply to some of the overall organizational priorities that we know we want to support as a marketing function. And then we want to run it through a few filters, right? The first one, as we mentioned previously, understanding capacity, access, right? Can we get patients in to this particular service line, this particular clinic, this particular physician, even to make sure that our marketing efforts and our marketing dollars are going to best serve the organization. From there, we want to make sure that we are really tight and focused on a measurable growth goal. What are we looking to drive? Do we have a specific goal related to volume, whether that's new patients or a caseload, to make sure that we are able to move the needle, right? We know with fewer dollars available for us to go to market with, we have to be that much tighter and that much more focused on providing a return on the dollars that we're putting into market. And then lastly, once we do all that, we have the plan in place. We want to make sure that we have the workflow to then drive those patients or prospective patients through the system so that we can really see the output for our marketing efforts. All right. With all of that being said, I'd like to now turn it over to a few of our experts here that we introduced up front. Up first, I wanted to talk to Claire and have Claire share some of her perspective on some of the key trends that she's seeing in the digital advertising space. So Claire, we'd love to hear from you and maybe what you're expecting to see here in the next 6 months.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jeremy. Wanting to zoom in a little bit here from Jeremy's perspective on the entire healthcare marketing ecosystem to specifically what we're seeing in the paid media space. One of the trends that is top of mind for us that we're watching the progress of is the upcoming TikTok ban. So we know that TikTok has become a trusted source of information, especially among young Americans. I definitely am myself a TikTok user and spend hours that I will not be counting scrolling my own For You page. And because people enjoy TikTok, it's become a great place to reach your audience for marketers of all industries, including healthcare marketers. But we know that in April, Congress passed a law giving ByteDance, TikTok's parent company, 9 months to divest or risk having the app be shut down in the United States. So my perspective is this will likely be contested in the courts and go on much longer than 9 months, but we don't necessarily want to rest on our laurels and expect that this will go on for a long period of time and that we don't necessarily need to react to it. So our recommendation and the recommendations we're talking about with our clients is to have a backup plan. You can continue to run your TikTok campaigns, especially if they've been proven successful for you and you've been reaching your goals, but have a backup plan for a channel that would have the same audience, reach the same objectives, and have the same goals that your TikTok campaigns are currently serving. So consider channels like Instagram, Snapchat, Reddit, where you might be able to have similar targeting and likely have the same objectives. All right. Another trend that has been trending for a long time now, but just does not seem to stop with its increase in adoption is streaming audio. So in the United States in 2023, there were 140 million listeners spending about 2 hours a day listening to streaming audio. And this just creates such a opportunity for marketers with targeted audiences to reach our goals for our campaigns. What makes this audience special and what puts it kind of in a separate category from some of the other advertising we're doing for our clients is the engagement we see on these platforms. So 25% of streaming audio listeners report listening with emotional intensity. So what does that mean? When you think about what you're listening to on Spotify or Pandora or in the Apple Podcast app, it's usually something you're really interested in. It's your crime podcast. If you're me, it's your reality TV recap podcasts. It's something that you're genuinely connected to. And it's not the linear radio, whatever you're getting is coming your way. This is something that you curated and you picked out. And streaming audio listeners report 28% increase in ad recall compared to other digital channels. So they're engaged, they're connected, they're remembering your ads. And so if streaming audio isn't already a part of your healthcare marketing mix, it's definitely something to consider.
Thanks, Claire. Appreciate that. We know that digital advertising, right, is one way to engage and attract audience for us online. But there's a second half to that, and that's really organic search. Organic search has always been a bit of a moving target, right? We know Google often updates their algorithm and changes how things are going to be shown within the search space. But today it feels like we are on the verge of some massive shifts. And so, Rob, I'd love to hear from you on what you're seeing in the organic search space and maybe a couple predictions for what we can expect here coming up.
Sure. Thanks, Jeremy. And, moving target, I think, is exactly kind of spot on in terms of, how anyone sort of in the SEO space are really looking at, that search space right there on the search results page and trying to target their audience has had to evolve, over the course of the last 10, 12 years. And now with AI, we're going to have to continue to evolve again, right? We know if you've been paying attention over the last 12 to 18 months, there's been a lot of predictions about how artificial intelligence will impact search, and we now know that it's officially here in a couple of different forms. When we think of how consumers are going to interact with it, you can think of it sort of as almost two different sides to a coin, right? First, we have Google, the large beast here, right? They take up the largest percentage of sort of search of searches that are conducted on a regular basis, and so just over a month ago, back in May, in the middle of May, Google launched AI overviews, right? And if you're not familiar with an AI overview, there's a nice example right here on the page, right there at the top of the page. Consumers are, that's an AI generated response that's really intended to really engage the audience. And it's also really intended to, answer some more complex questions and evolve with the user's search and build upon that and be a much more personalized experience. We know the intention from Google from that standpoint is, hey, how do we, answer those complex questions? It's also intended to really engage users at a different level than we've ever experienced before on the search results page. It's intended to help users ideate right there on the search results page. It's intended to help them brainstorm right there on the search results page. That is a shift in sort of how we're all typically used to seeing folks, on a search results page. We'd normally expect someone to come in, conduct a search, spend maybe a couple seconds on it, and then go right to sort of a destination page. That's not the intention with the AI overview. So when we say consumer behavior will follow, that's very much a big predictor. But it's a big prediction of what's going to happen as things kind of shape out here. Now, we're still very early on in the AI overviews in terms of sort of the general makeup. Any number of studies will say, hey, depending on the search and the search query, how often it will show up. It's not going to show up for every search. If you've got a very localized search or a much more sort of intent-driven search, it's likely not to show up. But if you're looking at a search that's intended to ask a question or intended to ideate at some level, that's when you're really going to have that search. So very early on, that's what we're seeing, and that's what we're continuing to kind of expect kind of moving forward. I mentioned two sides to a coin. The other side to the coin here is thinking of sort of, all the chatbots that are out there. You can think of Perplexity or, obviously the big one, ChatGPT. Those are very much, consumers are migrating to those and using those similar to how they would generally interact with a search results page, right? They're using those to answer questions. That's not what they're intended for, but that's really how that's happening. And we know that user engagements on both of those, on those platforms are growing. Not to the point right now where they're going to make a Google nervous in terms of a share. There definitely are areas where our consumers are getting a much more familiar as they go through. So really, what are some recommendations really from an organic search standpoint? How we're going to target our search audience? Really, the first one is we're very early in the process, so it's really get familiar with those. Conduct your searches, understand sort of both from your side of the coin, so from your as a consumer and also as the healthcare professional, how are folks engaging with those? Make sure you're really familiarizing yourself from that perspective. And then the other one here is just to do a little plug here. Join us back here in August, where we're going to have a couple more platforms and really get very specific on sort of AI and how that is really influencing the landscape overall, both at a very basic level and then a much more deeper level there too.
Right. Thanks, Rob. Appreciate that. Claire, I'd love to kick it back to you for a minute here. 2024 is a really unique year in a variety of ways. And so we have a couple big events that are going to be taking place here in the second half of the year that are going to have a pretty big impact on our digital advertising landscape. So would love to hear from you on what you're seeing over the year for the rest of the year, and maybe how some specific ways that healthcare marketers can help to prepare for some of these events.
There is a lot to contend with in 2024. First of those events is the Paris 2024 Olympics. So we know that the Olympics are coming up at the end of July. And the biggest trend here that we've seen is our healthcare clients layering digital first advertising packages on top of what they've done in the past for TV buys and increasing that digital proportion of it. So there are more of the Olympics audience moving towards Peacock, watching it live there, watching it on streaming, but then also going back and watching event clips, event highlights in Peacock's app. And so a lot of the Olympics audience is moving towards Peacock and digital. So what we've seen is layering on top of the live cable TV buys, a digital package with even some display elements to make sure that we're rounding out the full Olympics audience and not losing out on anybody who might be cord cutters and not watching the Olympics on cable. What is past is the ability to layer on any of these digital packages at this point. So we were planning for the Olympics back in April and May, and digital opportunities have that inventory is mostly bought at this point, but it's definitely something to consider for the Winter Olympics 2 years from now, and making sure that you're first to the table when it comes to your Peacock buy. All right. And then probably top of a lot of people's mind is the 2024 election. So this year we have the election paired with the Olympics, which is better than the last time we had an election when it was paired with COVID. So we are up against a better set of situations here in 2024 than we were in 2020. And what we are expecting is a significant increase in advertising spend. Something that has been trending every 4 years is a huge jump in spend on advertising. And overall, whenever we see an increase in investment buying for a finite amount of inventory against a finite audience, we're going to see costs increase across all channels, regardless of, what type of audience you're up against. Every audience is also an American, which is them also a voter. So you are up against the election ads, whether it be direct or tangential. And there's three things that we're talking to our clients about specifically to make sure that you're staying abreast of the election advertising, especially moving into these summer months. I would say August is really when we've started to prep our clients to start looking at the rising costs across all channels. So the first strategy we're recommending is to diversify your investment. Anytime you're running in a single channel for a campaign, you don't necessarily have the ability to be fluid and flexible against rising costs. So have a multi-channel strategy, and then you can shift to what's working and combat rising costs in that way. In an election year, when there's noise around what's true and what's not true, advertisers benefit from being transparent and living your mission. So up against political advertising, what Americans are looking for is just to be able to trust you, knowing that your message is true, and living your mission and your core values is something that people are craving more than any time. And then focus on brand safety. What channels are you able to layer brand safety features on top of, whether that be block lists or contextual content exclusions, making sure that you're not showing up against things that don't fit your brand. Be sure to be asking your partners about that and layering that on top, even if it comes at an additional cost.
Thank you, Claire. So Rob teed us up a little bit in the conversation about artificial intelligence and some of the changes that we can expect to see specific to the organic search landscape. I want to take a little bit of a broader view. So Brittany, I'd love to have you jump in and maybe walk through what you're hearing from healthcare marketers and how they're, maybe thinking about AI, where they are in the AI adoption landscape, and maybe some thoughts on where we go from here.
Yeah, I like how you call it the elephant in the room. It's the elephant in the room that has existed since the 1950s. So artificial intelligence has been around for a long time. And actually, if you think about a lot of the innovations, technology that we use every day, this bad boy, I was part of that. So just to put that elephant out of the room. But what has changed is with AI, it has become more user-friendly. There's an interface to it now. It works faster. I don't have to go talk to a data science team. I don't have to know how to write code and model. And it's really changed how we as consumers are using it. And a lot of that coming from OpenAI and ChatGPT in October of 23. But what's really interesting, especially talking to healthcare marketers, is the healthcare industry is actually on the leading edge. So a lot of what you read as a whole for artificial intelligence, they will reference innovations happening within healthcare. Now, a lot of that on the clinical side, the research side. And what's great about that, though, is that the innovation's already happening in our worlds. But what's interesting is you start to look at it as healthcare marketers, we're actually just starting to scratch the surface. And so we are behind from other industries as marketers. And one of the interesting conversations that we had at HMPS in 2024 was, where are you? And so I would put that question out just for all of you too. Just think about where would you plot your organization today? Are you scratching the surface? I know what it is and I'm starting to think about it. I'm ramping up. So I actually have started to implement it in some of the marketing that I do, or I am all in. Now, all in at that 10%, that's rare for any industry. So if you're not seeing yourself in the blue, all in, just take a deep breath. It's okay. Most people across any industry are scratching the surface or ramping up. And there's a few ways that we can start to look at this. And a lot of the conversations that we've had with our healthcare marketers is what should I start to think about? And they're starting to really seek to understand a few different areas. So you'll look at this, and probably top of mind for you is, how do I implement? What are the use cases? Where do I even start? I know that this is coming. This tidal wave is about to hit, but what do I do? And then we all just went through OCR. We're still in the thick of like the OCR bulletin changes in terms of tracking. And so we all took off our tracking off of our sites and started to think about, all right, how can I do this in a secure way? What's PHI? Do I have IP addresses? And so now we have this new thing, AI, that we're starting to use. And so we naturally want to think about the legal and compliance angle of it, but also the ethical considerations. Like, how am I using AI within my marketing, within any type of patient engagement that is ethical, but can also advance me as a marketer. And so you have that kind of push and pull on that. And then we start looking at what are the impact on healthcare diagnostics, workforce, and data quality and management. And so as we look at those implementation and practical use cases, the most important part is just getting started. And so a lot of questions that I get, I mean, just professionally, even personally, asking me like, where do I even start with AI? The number one piece of advice I can give you is just start in your day-to-day. Do not start to implement AI within your work if you haven't even used it at home. And so it can start with little things like, my favorite thing to do is ChatGPT writes my grocery list every week. And it saves me hours, but it's cut my cup of coffee down from 2 cups to 1 cup because it does it so fast. But you need to get used to it before you can even bring like your workforce behind you and your team and like really get them bought in. And so I wanted to share a few of our favorite AI applications that we use. First off, Accio. So Accio is a data large language model. So you'll hear LLM. That's a large language model. That's like ChatGPT. I can talk to my data. I can talk to it. I can get those answers quickly. And it's running those models to give me those answers. Then you have Claude, OpenAI, which is ChatGPT, Gemini. Those are the standard large language models that you probably hear often within blogs and podcasts and everything that you're listening and following up on. So everyone has their own preference on which LLM they're using, or what I always recommend is each has their benefits. And so don't just lock into one. You can use each of those based on what's best for what you're trying to solve for. And then Perplexity. So Perplexity is a great tool, especially as I talk about starting to use it personally before you start to bring it into your work. You can ask it a question. So it's a search engine, but operates with an LLM in it. And so I can ask it a question and it'll summarize those answers and then give me the resources. So I usually go to Perplexity to ask a lot of my questions first to easily just give me that quick answer that I need. And then I can go deeper if I want to into other tools. But I also, as Rob mentioned, we have other sessions coming up. So I do invite you to go deeper into AI with us as we go into AI-focused sessions in August.
Thank you, Brittany. Great advice. And yeah, I want to just put a point on that as well. We have 2 sessions upcoming here, specifically focused on AI. So if you have any interest in it, if you're just getting started and you want to go deeper into your AI journey, these would be great resources for you to hear from other experts in the space and hear a little bit more about how we're using it here at Fathom with some of our healthcare partners.
Thanks, Jeremy.
All right. So I want to wrap up with a few of the key takeaways that you've heard over the course of our webinar here today. So up front, right, adopt a methodical, very intentional, precision-focused approach to planning, right? So as we know, with reduced dollars available to us, the more precise we can be with our marketing efforts, the better off we're going to be as healthcare marketers. So that'd be the first takeaway, to really focus in there. Secondly, I want to hit on what Brittany just mentioned. Experimentation within generative AI is a great first step. If you haven't already begun using it in your personal life, no better time than now to start playing around with some of these tools, getting familiar with the functionality, and then you can really take that and jumpstart your professional growth with some of these tools and unlocking the power of AI. Then we heard a lot from Claire and Rob about some of the ongoing opportunities and changes that we're seeing in the digital marketing space. So talked a lot about the potential TikTok ban. So understanding what that is and starting to plan appropriately now and identifying alternative channels is a great place to start. We've heard a lot about streaming media, streaming audio, I should say. Specifically Spotify, Sirius XM. Adding those to your media mix now is a great way to engage your audience and really provide a message to your consumer in a medium that they're already consuming very, very, very strongly now. And then lastly, again, knowing that we are coming up on the second half of 2024, on the cusp of the Olympics in Paris kicking off, and already, deep into the election cycle. These are two big events for the year that, as healthcare marketers and as advertisers, we want to be aware of. We want to start planning for so that we can adapt our strategies in order to take advantage of some of these unique opportunities. So with that, Joe, I think I saw a few questions pop up in the chat. So I'd love to go into a little bit of Q&A and close out the session answering a few of your questions.
We do have a handful of questions that have come in through the Q&A feature, and there's still time to add yours if you're with us live and would like to toss one out. Christina Wales asked a few. She had to jump off at 1:30, but let's answer those questions for her, and she can catch them on the recording. First question here is, would love to understand, Claire, and I think this for you, how do we adjust streaming TV digital advertising buys during the election? What sort of levers are we pulling to make sure that we're being nimble in a complex environment?
Yeah, absolutely. I think traditional TV is the place where you're going to see most competition when it comes to directly competing with political advertisements. I think YouTube is a good place to pivot to, and even YouTube TV is a good place to pivot, although just in my personal experience and what I'm seeing a little bit in CPMs is a lot of people are pivoting to YouTube and YouTube TV. So there's going to be some competition from just the masses pivoting away from their normal TV buys to YouTube. I think that Hulu and CTV present a lot of opportunity to take what are your existing assets that you already have working well for your TV buys and putting them somewhere in a channel that might have lower CPM, lower costs, and could be an opportunity to say, okay, let's pull back from our TV buy for, October and November and use that 2-month to be a testing period for a channel we haven't been in before.
And I think Christina asked in follow-up, a concern that we likely all share when political advertisers are spending almost $9 billion. And that is, don't those messages just get lost? So we talked about cost. How does performance typically carry through an election season? And how might we stand out from the noise or find spaces where there's less?
Yeah, I think that's where your targeting strategy really becomes important, especially thinking about contextual and having your ads cut through the noise by showing up in content when somebody is already in the mind space of what you're trying to talk about. So we've been pivoting to a lot of contextual advertising for our healthcare clients. One, because it's cookieless future safe, and two, because it is targeting and it's also a placement and it's a way to find your audience while they're in the right mindset. And I think that is also a strategy to cut through the noise.
Excellent. Thank you, Claire. Brittany, this next one's for you. Could you elaborate on the initial steps healthcare orgs can take to start integrating AI into their marketing effectively? We have some sessions coming up in the future, but this person asked, what can I do in the next 30 days?
Yes. Well, so you're already using it personally. I think I made that point clear. My next piece of advice would be to look at what goals you're trying to achieve. So some people will be quick to say, oh, just start doing it for copy or use this tool. And there you go. You're off and running. You're starting to scrape the surface. But actually, I always recommend start with your goals. What are you trying to achieve? So maybe I have been looking to really grow the number of appointments that I'm trying to get in. And as I look at my results, I'm just not hitting my goals. Well, one place to start is you could use AI to then better analyze your data. And so you could get in to start to understand, like, what are the trends of what I'm seeing within my campaigns? It's a real easy way to start asking questions, starting to get familiar with prompting, and then starting to get an output that you can easily apply. If you rush right in and just say, I'm going to use it for content or I'm going to use it for ad creation, you might actually be missing the gold nugget that you need to start showing that value across your system and how you can begin to use AI in other areas.
And so you're advocating for potentially using AI tools as almost a thought partner as you analyze the data that's available to you.
Yeah.
If you were getting started first, I just want to make sure I understand. If you were getting started, what tool, what AI would you use?
As my thinking partner?
Yeah.
I mean, the natural one is start with ChatGPT. It has the easiest interface. It's easy to use. You can start asking it questions. I would advise that if you're using ChatGPT, though, just the free version, don't put any proprietary information in there because they will be used to train your models. But it is a good way to ask for industry and research and some anonymous data.
Thanks, Brittany.
You're welcome.
Jeremy, I think this next question is you. I think it's tied to some of the information you shared around planning amidst these constraints and opportunities we see. And that question is, what can hospital systems do to set achievable, measurable growth goals for marketing efforts? What do I do if I don't have that in place today?
Yeah, that's a great question, and a common challenge that we see among the healthcare partners that we work with, right? So oftentimes, and I know this was true back in my time working at a system here in Cleveland, marketing can feel a little bit segmented, right? A little bit distant from the operations and the financial team, and really understanding the downstream impact of our work. So my advice there is first and foremost, make sure you have a very close working relationship with your partners in the building, right? So if you're working with specific service line marketing managers, make sure you have a very close understanding of their strategic goals, their priorities for the year. Make sure you understand, the operations, or, have the opportunity to get some of that access and capacity data, and then continue to work and build those partnerships internally with finance and others so that you can have a true understanding of what's happening after a patient comes in the building. And again, we know within healthcare, especially as Brittany mentioned, with the OCR bulletin and the tracking and things that we have to be very aware of, there's a bit of a disconnect, right, from what we know we can see and what we can drive from a marketing aspect to what we're seeing downstream. But there are ways to connect those dots, and I think the first step is gathering that data, gathering that information, having conversations internally on what we're looking to achieve together, and then starting to put together some models to define what can we see and what can we utilize as data to move forward to set some goals. You can also use, models, benchmarks to say, hey, on average, our cost per acquisition is estimated at this, right? And use that to run some models that you can test on to see, is this true? How does this vary between service lines, even between services and procedures within the service line, to further refine where you want to go? But that's always a great place to start. Again, relationships, and then building some of those models.
Excellent. Claire, is there anything you'd like that? I saw you unmuted, related to maybe more campaign-specific goal setting?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that understanding how you're using your marketing dollars to effectively influence the most highly impacting and highly valued service lines is to roll up to that larger strategy that Jeremy's talking about is the best place to go.
Great. Thank you, Claire. And we have one more question. And so for those of you who are with us, use this as the last warning to get your questions in. But this last question, I think, is back to you, Claire. So streaming audio is popular. We get it. If we explore that channel, what are some best practices that we can leverage to make sure we're maximizing engagement effectiveness in these platforms that might be new for our systems?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's two ways to approach targeting for streaming audio. One of them is contextual and one of them is programmatic. So buying ad inventory that is contextual to the topic that you're trying to promote. So in this case, targeting on health-focused podcasts, or targeting programmatically, targeting your demographics, your audience, and the behaviors that you know that they have, and then not judging what they listen to. So don't get in the weeds on what podcast you're showing up to, because if they are your target audience, that's what they listen to. And then see how those two different strategies perform against each other.
I love that. We can all owe each other a little bit of grace.
That's right.
Thank you, Claire. And so we're just about at time, and that wraps up our questions. And so, Jeremy, back to you.
Absolutely. Thanks, Joe. Well, thank you all again for joining us here in the first of our five-part series. I wanted to preview a few of the sessions that are coming up over these next few weeks. So you can see that will be on Thursdays at 1 p.m. Eastern. On July 11th, we're going to cover targeting, tracking, and personalization. On the 25th of July, it's going to be really focused on maximizing performance amid some of those challenges and constraints that we're all facing as healthcare marketers. And then we're going to close out the series really focused on AI. So August 8th and August 22nd, we are going to take a deeper look at artificial intelligence, specifically with a healthcare marketing lens attached to it. So a lot of what Brittany shared here today and Rob talked about, we're going to be going even 2 or 3 levels deeper to really showcase the power of AI and how we can really utilize it to advance our marketing efforts in healthcare. So again, I want to thank you all for joining, and I look forward to seeing you at upcoming sessions.